Hi everyone, I bet you're all waiting for this today. The weather's absolutely awful here, it's chucking it down. I've got a nice little woodland scene. This is quite near us, it's one of my photos, with lots of cow parsley in at the bottom. It's got really nice light and shadow, so that's what we're going to be concentrating on today. I'm hoping you can see this. What I want you to do is, what we normally do is draw out the path, a horizon line about two-thirds up. You've got your pathway through here, and there's some tree trunks, the bigger tree trunks, and you don't need to draw all the branches. If you can then come along your path and make it come in and out a little bit, just follow the shape so you know where your green is going to. That will be really helpful. What I've done, I want to just quickly talk about the masking fluid, is I've used a bit of a cheats way to get it on. You can just do it with a colour shaper and dot it on, but it takes absolutely ages. So what I've done is I've used an old bit of sponge. Now, what I don't want you to do is use your best bit of sponge and go on, because the masking fluid, in the same way as it does your brushes, will ruin your sponge. You can recover it by dissolving the latex solution. You see here mine's just gone a little bit. You can dissolve the latex solution from the masking fluid in white spirit, but you'll never be able to really use this sponge properly for sponging paint again. So my advice is to take a little bit of your sponge off if you've got one, and keep that just for masking fluid, or do it with the colour shaper and just take your time. So what I've done is I've wet the sponge, I've wrung it out, I've dabbed it on kitchen towel lots to make sure there's no water on, then I've dabbed it lightly into the masking fluid, and I've done that dab and twist motion where I can see the cow parsley. Now you've got to also go on with the colour shaper, and what I've done is I've come in and created some extra dots in this area. If you think that the cow parsley forms a head in a little circle, then you can come in and dot in a little circle, and if you do a few of those, the rest of it then will hold together. Your eye and brain will do the rest. So I've done a few. Make sure they're random. You don't want to end up with a pattern of cow parsley, so bring some close together, space some out. The fact that you've got a little bit of dabbing from a sponge will help. If you don't want to use masking fluid, or you haven't got masking fluid, you can use white acrylic after or white gouache, whatever you've got to paint on. So you don't need to necessarily worry about that at this point. So I'm just letting that dry. Let me talk about colours. Okay, so here I've got Gamboge yellow, sap green, sepia nice and thick, so these two are just in a normal wash. I've got sap green and cobalt blue, a tiny touch of rose on my palette. This colour is for the pathway, and that is a mix of burnt sienna mainly, a touch of sap green and a touch of permanent rose. So you're looking for that colour that's got a pinkiness to it for the pathway, and we're going to use that a little bit later on. Okay, so I'm going to crack on with above the horizon line, and what I really want to do is try and preserve the light. So I'm thinking all the time as I'm doing this today, preserve the light. So I'm coming down to where I'm deeming the horizon line to be. You can't really see this side where the horizon line is, but just bring it in line with the other horizon line, just so you know you're covering the whole of that area. Now I haven't got any sky colour today, because I'm going to leave those bits white coming through so that I'm getting the nice bits of light. It's quite a dense, because it's coming towards summer, quite a dense foliage at the top, not like when we did the bluebells. It's good practice for trees, good practice for shadow and light. Okay, so lightest colour first, Gamboge yellow. I'm coming in, so you're ignoring the tree trunks. And I want you to think about preserving this bit of white at the end of the path. So you want no yellow or green going in on there. So just pick out some of the lighter areas. We're going to come on with a bit of sponging later, and you're just dabbing in. You're not doing what I would class as a sky where you're washing it over, you're just dabbing to get some light in. So this is a yellow to start with. Rinse that off. You're going to come into your sap green, and again dabbing. You want a mixture of this dabbing technique. I'm using my round number 10 and then some sponging later. So look for the bigger areas that you can see on here and just dab those in. So you're going to lose your tree trunks, which is why we don't spend too much time drawing them out. So what I do want you to do is think about the line that you're creating at the bottom, and just make sure that it's not too straight, too smooth. Got something to butt up to later on the next level. I'm going to dip into some of the darker green, which is made with sap green and cobalt blue. Bring some of that in as well. In these denser areas, dab, dab, dab. So I'm using the brush slightly on the side and just dabbing, and then just letting the watercolour do its thing. Then with the round number 6, I'm just going to come in with a little bit of sepia. So you can do a few sort of tree trunky bits in the back, an impression of. Look for those darker areas, that's where you really want to capture these bits. Just fade them out, don't take them right the way to the top. This is always one of those things where you end up putting it in the wrong place and then you've got a tree trunk there later. Pop these in, but they just give a little bit of a softness and a sense of distance. Because the foliage is quite high, we haven't got to worry about taking them up like we did with the bluebells. In some ways summer trees are much easier, in other ways they're harder. And pop a few in here. Whilst it's still damp, this gives a nice effect, like a fuzzy effect. I'm going to take a few branches over here. You can go down to a rigger to do this if you want as well, or a line writer. Just whatever you're used to. I can do it with my little finger resting quite well with the point of the 6. Okay, so I'm going to dry that one off. There we go. Okay, so that's nice and dry now. I'm going to come on to this bottom section, get a base on this. This is when you'll see how well your masking fluid's done. So water everywhere. All over that bottom section. And we're going to start exactly the same way as we did up at the top half, is we're going to come in with the yellow first. So I want you to look where the light is and get that lighter yellow on there. Remember, your white's masked out. So you're looking at the green tones when you're doing this bit. See, there's a lot of yellow in this side. It's a lot warmer, and then the other side is a lot cooler because it's more in the shade. I'm going to pick up a little bit of light just at the back here, just so it ties into that nice area at the back. And then in with the sap green. So a lot of that yellow you've put on, you're going to take some of this sap green through. Again, don't worry about the tree trunks. We're going to come over those because you can't just have bright yellow, you've got to have this sap green in there. It's drying very quickly today. And bring some of this sap green in this side. And then I'm going to come into the darker sap green and cobalt blue mix. Got quite a lot of that in this side. Make sure you're getting all around those tree trunks in, especially where you've got the masking fluid. You'll be able to see those patterns appearing for the cow parsley. And then look this side to see if there's any darker areas you want to pop in. Remember, some of this can go in with sponging later, you don't have to get everything. There's definitely some darker areas towards the bottom here. Sometimes if you squint at it you can see more where these are. Rinse my brush out, and then I'm coming into this burnt sienna, rose and sap green mix. Just going to bring that across the path. Remember, it needs to have that pinky hue to it. It'll work so much better with that pinky hue. If it ends up without the pinky hue, it tends to look a bit mucky looking. So I'm doing horizontal strokes. As you come towards the back where the light's fading, I want to make sure that I've not got much on the brush. I'm actually taking a bit off and drying the brush off and just spreading it through so that that colour is fading as it gets further back. Doesn't matter if it blends into the green. Remember where your lines are. You're looking to pick those edges into the foliage so you don't just end up with a straight edge. And just make sure you're doing these horizontal strokes so you get that nice feeling of a flat path there. Okay, so I'm going to dry that one off. Oh, actually, I'm just going to take a touch of, you know me and my rose, a touch of rose on my brush, and I'm just going to bring that through a little bit at the front, because I want the path to make sure that the path comes forward a little bit. That hint more rose at the front will bring that bit of the path forward. Okay, I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so I'm going into sponging now. I've got some sap green on the sponge. I've wet the sponge first, wrung it out really well, dabbed it off, dabbed into the sap green on there. I'm going to start to bring in some foliage. So it's nice and dense today. You're going to have a lot of foliage in here, and you're going to come over these bits. So the trick is to not lose the light now. So dab, twist while you're up, then dab back down again. So they're every little bit's different. So this is sap green to start with. And you're coming over these areas. You're coming over your tree trunks. There's some little bits just around this area of light, so I'm going to dab a few bits very lightly on there. A bit more in at the top. Then I'm going to come in this side here, sap green. Bring those bits into the pathway so that they're blending together. And then just at the back here there's a bit of sap green as well. Okay, then I'm coming into the darker colour. So this is the sap green and cobalt blue. I'm coming over again and I'm just picking out the darker foliage. So this isn't everywhere. You'll find you use quite a lot of paint. Don't worry about what's going over the trees at this stage. We can lift it out a little bit later. We've got enough to worry about without worrying about what the tree trunks look like at this stage. And you need those really dark areas in to make the light light, so don't be afraid to build it up. I'm dabbing quite a lot down there. Okay, so then I'm going to come on to the bottom bit now and start to build this up. Just concentrate on this right hand side for now. You could be a lot more liberal with the dabbing than you normally would be with the spring trees. There's much more foliage and much more foliage on the ground as well, so it makes it a bit easier. I'm just building this up. Again, breaking through on that pathway in places so that you're getting that blend. Not too much in the background. And we look over this side, if you bring it more to the bottom area, you'll find you use a lot of paint. I've just had to remix mine. Okay, and then the last colour you want to bring in is a little bit of sepia. And what I've done is I've brought a tiny bit along this back edge here, sponging in a little bit, so I'm looking where it's dark basically. I'm bringing a little bit in. I've got a little bit in down here, and a little bit down in this section. So I've already taken a tiny bit in. I'm just taking a little bit more. So this is going to give you that nice depth. A little bit up there. I'm just looking where areas that are really dark, because the more dark that again, the better the light will be. Okay, I'm going to dry that one off now. Okay, so what I'm doing now is just lifting out a little bit of the tree trunks. Again, it's impression of, it doesn't have to be exact. So I'm just using a little bit of water. I've already done this one a little bit there, a couple of bits there, and then when you've got the water on, you're just going to dab it off a bit, and it's just lifting it enough. You can come back in and lift it a bit more. You're going to have paint go over this anyway. And not all of them need to be light. Okay, so I'm going to come on and start doing some tree trunks now. I'm going to use that path colour and the sepia. So on these bigger ones, so you've already got like a little hint of the green there anyway. I've popped a bit of water on. I'm just going to run it up. Trick with trees is to always use the biggest brush you can and then work your way down. So hopefully you've got some cow parsley at the bottom of there, so it's not too much to get in. You can do a jaggedy bottom if you haven't got the cow parsley. We haven't got many big long trees in this. If there's not quite enough water, just take a little bit more on at this stage. You want it to flow and get that cylindrical feel. And then I'm going to come in with some sepia. I'm just coming down this side first. the shadow is mainly down this side because the light's coming from the back, but there was a little bit of light coming from the right hand side as well. I'm going to leave that bit here, but I'm going to pop a little bit just bottom here. Just come in and just touch in places. So you get that nice, it's flowing, it's got that nice cylindrical feel to it. What always tends to happen is I'm never quite sure if these branches are coming off which tree. So I'm going to take a couple of darker branches off here. There's something here that's darker. I think it adds something anyway to this one. Quite like that shape there. And I'm going to come over and I'm going to do the big ones on this side as well. So give my brush a little bit of a rinse. Right, there's one just in this edge here. Oh, I didn't rinse well there. Right, I've rinsed my brush a bit better now. Good job, that's a dark tree. Let's come in at this side. Right, so this is coming into foliage without any cow parsley in. So I'm going to make sure that I end up with a jaggedy bottom. So this is just sepia going on this one because it's a bit darker. Plenty of dark at this bottom section. Just break into it a little bit with a number 6 or whatever, whichever brush you want, just to break that so you get that jaggedy bottom. And then I'm going to come on and do this tree here. So a little bit of water on the trunk. We're going to come on with the path colour. I'm just going to flow that a little bit. Then you're going to come in with the sepia. And just spread that through. And you can take the sepia further up. This is a bit of a strange shape tree, I can't quite work out where all the branches are going. Take a branch off this tree here through. You want these ones to frame the picture, so this dark is important, but so is that sort of framing that's coming round here, leading the eye. So it doesn't necessarily matter where those branches are coming from, as long as they're going in that direction. That's what the beauty of this picture. It's the path, it's leading you that way. The composition's great. You can have a few branches just jutting through as well. You don't need to do every single one. So we've got a lot of foliage up here, so they could be jutting through the foliage. So I'm still managing with my number 10, but drop down if you feel better, more at ease with a different one. This is quite a new number 10, so the point's really good on it. And then I'm going to come in and do these ones towards the back. Okay, so I'm using this lighter colour now, which is the path colour. I'm just bringing that over these. Again, just make sure that the bottoms of these trees aren't too straight. You can just run a few branches through. And we're actually going to leave those just in the light colour. And then there's one just here. And one next to it. Just in the light colour. And then I'm going to pop one just here. Just layering. So this is just the light path colour going on to dry. Just starting to create those tree shapes. There's quite a thick tree here. And then when you've got the soft ones and then these lighter ones, you start to get that feeling of the luminosity coming through. It works really nicely. Okay, I'm just dipping into the sepia. I'm going to put a little bit just on the side of that one. And then there's one just next to it there. So I'm just painting little bits of that tree. And then I've got one that's about here. So I'm taking sepia in, but it's not too strong. I've got a bit of water on the brush. But because it's smaller, I don't need to wet the area and worry about that. Just coming over the light here. Let me come around this side. I'll be able to see. In fact, I'm going to flip it round because it'll just make it easier. Flip that round, flip my photo round. This bit will flow a bit better then. Again, dipping into the sepia. Just going to bring through a few twiggy bits at the front here. Just for an added bit of interest, really. Okay, I'm going to dry that one off. So that's all dry now. What I've got is I've mixed some permanent rose and cobalt blue, and I've got this nice violet colour, and that's going to be our shadow colour. Violet always works best for a shadow colour. You just need to make sure that it's not too strong. What you're not doing is putting a purple stripe on your picture. So the first thing that I'm going to do is come in with a brush and just start to create some shadow in the distance. It just puts you a little bit more in control here with the brush, and then we'll worry about further down with the sponge in a second. So nice and varied pressure. Remember those horizontal strokes. And just keep checking your colour. You can always add a bit more water to the brush. It just makes a really, really nice shadow colour purple. You wouldn't think to choose it really, but it does work brilliantly. So I'm just popping these shadows in as I can see them on the picture. And it's up to you when you swap to come down to the sponge. You can do the whole thing if you want with the brush, or you can take a little bit on with the sponge. I'm just going to see how I go. What I will say to you is start in one place and work around, because you're coming on to dry, and what you don't want is to end up with a watermark. So remember, you need to be able to see the colour well, but you don't want it to look stripy. So in some places you'll find you need it a lot darker, and in other places you'll find you need it lighter, so like on the pathway. So just keep varying how much water you put in on your brush. If at any point you think, oh, I need to dry it, you can dry it and then carry on. Don't feel you've got to do the whole thing in one go. And don't worry if you don't quite get the shadow in the right place, it'll still work. That wasn't quite in the right place there, but it's still going to work. So it's working quite well with just the brush and doing it like this. So I might not even use the sponge, but you can use a sponge. If you've got a big area and you're worried about getting that on, you can definitely use a sponge. Just break this up a little bit here. It's nice to have little bits of sharp shadow and little bits of soft shadow in places, and we've got that soft shadow underneath. Just going to take a bit more paint into that section there. We've got a little bit light. And then coming over this side. So really just, if you struggle and you can't see where the shadow goes, then try and squint and you'll see a little bit more as to where you're placing it. It's really important that you get this in for it to hold together, the light to work. There's quite a lot of shadow this side. Obviously don't want to eliminate all of the green and the work that we've done, so I'm being a little bit careful how much I'm putting on here. But the more that you get here, the better it will work. A little bit there. That's not in shadow, this side's in shadow. You might find when we take the masking fluid off in a minute that we do need to put a tiny bit of shadow on some of this cow parsley as well, depending on how obvious it is. The other thing that I did just before I've done this shadow is I just rubbed off a couple of bits of masking fluid on the tree trunk there, because it shouldn't have got onto there, and just painted a little bit of the sepia over, just because I didn't want that to be showing. I'm just going to make sure that I'm getting up to these edges here so I haven't got a halo around the tree. That's working really nicely. I'm just going to give it a quick blast. Mainly on the path, and I've got a little bit more because what I've got in places is double shadow, so I can just run through enough colour on it where I've got these extra darker bits and just get those double shadows in. And then you can just dab a little bit of water in places on those, just so it doesn't look like a really obvious line. It's like a bit of a double shadow appearing, but not an obvious brush mark line. With the sponge, I'm just going to pick up just a little bit. I'm just run out. I'm just a little bit of the path colour. Just because I want a little bit of texture. Check the colour on that. So don't go mad when you're doing this, but just in this front section, whilst it's still damp, just take a little bit of texture in. It can come over both sections. It can come over the light area and it can come over the shadow, and that will just pull it together a little bit. Just in this front area, don't go too far back. You're just giving it texture towards the front. Gives it again another sense, another dimension of depth there. Okay, I'll dry that off and we'll rub the masking fluid off. Okay, so I've rubbed the masking fluid off now. There's a couple of little tweaks that I need to do. So if it's quite patchy and you've got quite big areas, I want you to come in with a little bit of green. It can be either of the greens, and it will just dab it through and break it up a little bit. Remember that that light's towards the back, so you don't want to lose all of that light. So be very light about what you're dabbing on. You can also do it with a little bit of a brush. And what I'm going to do is just come in with a little bit of the purple, the number 6, just in places, just to take a little bit out in shadow. So if you hit sort of half, or just dab over a little bit of some of the bigger ones, it'll just give it a hint of shadow and an extra dimension. I'm not going to do any towards the back. You're just looking to make sure that you haven't got any too blobby bits. You're going to add a little bit of green if you've got two blobby bits, and then that'll break those up, and then you're going to add a little bit of shadow, but we're not eliminating all the white. That works really nicely. And then the other thing that I've got here is again a misplaced bit of masking fluid. So I'm going to come over. You can add some extra branches at any point. You can pop that branch back in with a bit of sepia. if when it goes onto the tree you think, okay, so what I was just saying there is that when you've painted it on, if you get a join mark there, if you just pop a bit of water just on the side of the tree here, you'll just soften that in and it'll work really nicely. So that's it, we're all done. Hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you next week. Bye.